First of all, thanks to everyone for coming out, and thanks for having me. What I'm going to be talking about today is Iran and the Muslim Brotherhood. They're basically two parts of the same pie, the radical Islamic pie. It's something that we call Islamist. And that's different than Islamic. You see, Islamic is referring to a religion of 1.2 billion people. They have different viewpoints. There's a great deal of diversity within the Muslim community. Islamist is when that religion takes a political element. That's when they're talking about the religion being a form of governance, as opposed to just a guide for your everyday life. And it's something that they want to impose on all of you. In their mind, this form of governance, the perfect form of governance, cannot be successful unless they vanquish man-made democracy and all other forms of infidel governance. So it's naturally a supremacist ideology and an expansionist ideology with the ultimate goal of bringing this around the entire globe. Now, some of you that might have been following this know terms like stealth jihad or creeping Sharia. And these terms are often criticized as being over the top. I mean, they sound scary, right? When you say stealth jihad, it sounds like something out of a movie. And the Muslim Brotherhood will say, oh no, we don't engage in that, that's all crazy. But when they talk about their strategy, it's the exact same thing. They call it gradualism. So we call it stealth jihad, or any of these other terms that you can read out there, they call it gradualism. And what that means is it's a long-range plan where they gradually have victories. See, on 9/11, we all woke up to what Al-Qaeda is. We thought we woke up to terrorism and radical Islam, but we didn't. What we woke up to was Al-Qaeda. So we view threats through the template of Al-Qaeda. If you condemn the attacks of 9/11, then all of a sudden you're a moderate. The Muslim Brotherhood condemns 9/11, but many of them think that the Jews did it. You see, and so our standard for what a moderate is has to be much higher. And so what Al-Qaeda does is they get the ingredients for a bomb and they set it off the next day. They're a relatively young terrorist organization. They don't know what they're doing. The Muslim Brotherhood has been around since 1928 in Egypt. They know what they're doing. They have a cost-benefit analysis. They say what works and what doesn't. They criticize each other, criticize themselves, and they say, let's have the most common sense strategy. So the Muslim Brotherhood operates in the United States, but they're not going to set off bombs because why would you jeopardize an incredible fundraising and recruiting network? You set off a bomb, all your guys are going to get wrapped up by the FBI. That doesn't make any sense. And a lot of the reasons they condemn Al-Qaeda is based on tactics. They condemn other groups because some Islamists genuinely think 9/11 was just going a step too far. But when it comes to killing American soldiers, executing gays, killing Israeli children, well then that's fine. Yet, we fall into this trap of calling them moderate. For example, the Obama administration does seem to believe that the Muslim Brotherhood is a moderate force. They won't come out and say it, but the top intelligence officer, the director of national intelligence, James Clapper, a guy who I cannot believe has not been fired yet, said to Congress that the Muslim Brotherhood can actually form a counter to Al-Qaeda because they can draw Muslims away from violence and into elections. So he's characterizing the Muslim Brotherhood as essentially a positive force. A force that, yes, maybe we disagree with politically, but we can work with them. And it's fundamentally wrong. And you have top administration officials, and this is a bipartisan problem, by the way. This isn't just an attack Obama session. This goes on with Senator John McCain. I'm sorry to say Senator Marco Rubio of Florida. This is a bipartisan problem. They will say that the Muslim Brotherhood is pragmatic and that they're nonviolent. It's not true. I just came out with an article last week where I was arguing with Twitter on their English language page. And for some reason, they keep talking to me, and I don't know why. And they sent out an article that said the Muslim Brotherhood doesn't use violence or force against their opponents. And so I sent them a tweet, not expecting an answer, saying, well, what about American soldiers and Israelis? And they said, well, we support violence against aggressors and invaders of our lands. You see, that's all it took, was one tweet for me to figure out that the Muslim Brotherhood actually is a violent organization. Yet you have people like the spokesman for the National Security Council that runs your national security policy saying that they're a non-violent democratic force. So this is a major, major intelligence failure. And it goes beyond just one administration because this is part of a long-range disinformation campaign by the Brotherhood. They came here in the 1960s. They set up their first front organization called the Muslim Students Association, which now has a presence on over 150 college campuses in North America. And then they set up all these other organizations. And unfortunately, they are the major Muslim American organizations in the United States. That doesn't mean the majority of Muslims support the Muslim Brotherhood or are radical. But the leadership, the institutions, by and large, were created by the Muslim Brotherhood. So they stole the leadership mantle. They realized that the Muslim community in the United States was growing, and they said, well, we better start acting, building the mosques, building the supposedly civil rights organizations, so that we can lead them and someone else doesn't. And so that's where things stand today. And as for gradualism, everything the Brotherhood does is in stages. Everything. And they'll tell you what those stages are. And one of the major elements of this strategy is deception. And around the 1960s, 1970s, partially because of globalism and just the appeal of American values, words like elections and freedom and democracy got a lot of popularity even in the Arab world. So what did the Brotherhood do? They adopted the terms. They didn't fight against them. And they just twisted what they mean. So the top Brotherhood cleric will say, we support democracy, and everyone reports that. But then I'll look in his sermons and I'll say, well, what's his definition of democracy? Right. His idea is that true freedom only comes within the confines of Sharia law. You see, we're the ones not living in freedom because we're not living under God's law. See, so they hijacked a popular term and just twisted it. Right. Even Hamas operates in a staged fashion. In December of 2011, the leader of Hamas talked about the interim objective of liberation of Gaza, the West Bank, or Jerusalem towards the liberation of all Palestine. That means the destruction of Israel. See, so even here, when you hear about the peace process and they say, we agree to a certain settlement, what they're saying in their own minds and to their people is, yes, we agree to this settlement for now. And it's understood that way. The American media can't pick up on and read between the lines because they don't study the ideology and how they talk about these things. But if you were to talk to any follower of Hamas, they'd say, oh no, I support a settlement with Israel for an independent Palestinian state. Because in their mind, it's a given, yes, I still support the destruction of Israel. Here's another example, another modern. The Egyptian president, Mohammed Morsi, a member of the Muslim Brotherhood, is currently being embraced by governments around the world, and also Bill Clinton. He was talking to CNN, an American media outlet, so he realized he has to change his tune a little bit. He was talking to Elliot Spitzer, actually, on CNN, and he said, we are a nonviolent organization. And Elliot Spitzer said, Hamas is your branch, so how's that work? And he goes, we do not use violence against anyone. What's going on in the Palestinian land is resistance. So when you talk to them, you can't even agree on what violence is. So it makes a dialogue completely impossible because in order to wiggle out of things, they're just going to change the definition of a key term in that sentence. Now, I can explain the different phases that the Muslim Brotherhood goes to, but I don't need to explain it. I can just quote what they say. Because in 2004, the FBI raided a suspected terrorist home and they found in his basement boxes and boxes of documents. And it turned out he was one of the Brotherhood's guys in America recording their meetings. And they actually submitted it into a trial, the largest terrorism finance trial in U.S. history. And so this is public information. You can actually read the American Muslim Brotherhood's own documents now. And they said that their work in America is a kind of grand jihad in eliminating and destroying Western civilization from within. And they list the 5 phases. The first phase is the secret establishment of leadership. That's what I talked about before, when they came here in the 1960s and they started setting up all these front organizations. The second phase is the gradual appearance on the public scene. And this includes infiltrating various sectors, gaining religious institutions, and listen to this, gaining public support and sympathy. Wow. Now think about what they're trying to do here. They're not like Al-Qaeda where they're saying kill everyone. Right. They recognize that they can't overthrow the US government tomorrow. So their goal is to influence policy. And that sounds crazy, but it's an accepted fact among Americans that lobbyists, special interests, foreign governments, the oil companies, the health insurance companies all try and influence policy. That's not considered crazy. So why wouldn't the Muslim Brotherhood try and do the same thing? The third phase is what they call the escalation phase. That sounds violent, but they explain it. How do they escalate? Utilizing mass media. And this document was written in 1991, and they said it's currently in progress. Stage 3 on the 5-stage plan. So if they were happy then, imagine how happy they are now. Think of this quote. There's a group called the Council on American Islamic Relations, and that's a Muslim Brotherhood front, according to the federal government, by the way. So that's not even just me saying it. Was quoted on July 5th, 2008, saying to some of his supporters, not realizing that this was going to get out to the media, he said, "Media in the United States is very gullible, okay? And they will see if you have something to say, especially as a Muslim, if you have something to say, they will come running to you. Take advantage of it." Now here's how this plays out. The Muslim Brotherhood Front organizations, because they get money from overseas and they've been at this for so long in the US, are the ones that have the publicists, that have the offices across the country, the media contacts, the relationships with the churches, by the way, and the relationship with the government. And so when the media needs a story and they say we need a Muslim perspective about this issue, they come forward and they say we are the gatekeepers, we're the representatives of the Muslim American community, even if they're not. And then the media has them on to speak as the spokespeople of the Muslim American community, and it just became a self-fulfilling prophecy. You see, before they might not have actually been the leaders of the Muslim American community, but then once the media starts treating them like they are, the rest of the community falls in line. So, to give you an example of how this would work, the best example I can think of is, you guys know the Westboro Baptist Church? Christian extremists, crazy, horrible people. Imagine if they had funding from overseas and all of us Christians here in the US were just starting out. It's an atheist country. And so we're trying to build churches and we're trying to raise the money, and then they come in with millions and millions of dollars, set up all the churches, set up all the organizations, hire all the publicists, and then they get the leadership mantle. That's kind of what happened in the Muslim American community, is that this overseas organization came over here and they basically create this image that they are representative of all Muslim Americans, and so that what happens is that politicians and the government have to bow to their demands. Because when they act, they then preach back to the community that trusts them and probably doesn't know that they're actually Brotherhood operatives, and they fall in line. A good example would be, we have a film called The Third Jihad that's available back out there. And we show a lot of clips of what's going on in the Middle Eastern Arab media. And so the NYPD was using it to train some of their officers. I mean, it makes sense. And the NYPD got in trouble for it because groups like the Council on American Islamic Relations, often referred to as CARE, were mad about it. And they said it's an anti-Muslim hate film. It's narrated by a devout Muslim whose family founds mosques. But it's an anti-Muslim hate film. And the NYPD, or not the NYPD, the New York Times said the exact same thing. Editorial after editorial after editorial saying that the NYPD was using an anti-Muslim hate film. And so then CARE and the rest of them start getting protests going, and they turn it into a major political issue. And none of the major media outlets ask the question that maybe the reason CARE and these groups don't want this film shown to the NYPD is because it exposes them as Muslim Brotherhood fronts. Maybe this has something to do with that. Nobody asked that question. But we're still living with the consequences of that controversy, and here's why. It caused enough of a controversy that all the national security-related departments and agencies of the US government said we need to review our counterterrorism training material to make sure that nothing offensive appears. Because these organizations are very mad and, you know, they represent all Muslims, so we've got to reach out to the Muslim American community. So we need to change our training. And to this day, the FBI will not identify the three experts on Islam that oversaw that cleansing of our material. But I have a pretty good idea of who they belong to. Because in February, the director of the FBI met with an interfaith coalition that included two organizations, the Islamic Society of North America, a Muslim Brotherhood front tied to Hamas, and the Muslim Public Affairs Council, also founded by the Muslim Brotherhood, to discuss this review of our counterterrorism training materials. So let me emphasize this. You have Muslim Brotherhood founded organizations overseeing the changes of our counterterrorism training material. You also have members of these Brotherhood Front organizations advising the Department of Homeland Security, the State Department, and other agencies, all because they want to reach out to the Muslim American community. My argument is that they should reach out to the Muslim American community, but they should go through the right organizations. Help out the ones that actually believe in American liberty and have no problem condemning Hamas. But instead, we're working through organizations that apologize for Hamas. And what's been the effect of their changes to the counterterrorism training materials? I can tell you with utmost certainty right now And there's going to be information coming out about this hopefully soon.